You are listening to the Small Town Big Talk Show, the weekly podcast for small town people with big dreams and ideas. I'm your host, Rebecca Undum, and each week we'll cover a topic meant to inspire, encourage, and empower you to live big in your small town. Although it has its challenges, nothing beats small town living, and we're committed to sharing the best of what's working in the communities we serve. So enjoy this episode, and we hope it helps you to bloom where you've been planted. My guests on today's episode are Deb Brown and Becky McCrae. They are the co-founders of a website called SaveYour.town, and they joined me on the show today to talk about the results of their 2019 Survey of Rural Challenges. This is a survey that they deploy every 2 years, and then they do their best to not only through their speaking and the webinars and the educational live events that you can attend and working with these two women, but also through their newsletter, the videos that they produce once a month. They try to address and provide some out-of-the-box ideas for small towns to address these challenges. There are about 1 million things that you can take away from this chat with these two women. They have lived their lives in service to rural communities and small towns. So besides just sharing the challenges that came up in their survey, we talk about the idea-friendly method. We talk about empty buildings and how to deal with that. We talk about how to deal with people that give you all these ideas, especially if you're in a leadership position of sorts, whether you're involved with the chamber or your economic development group, and you have all these people coming to you and saying, oh, you should do this. They have an answer to how to deal with that. And what I love the most about these two ladies is their information and their insights are all honestly so practical, and they are big believers in not having to spend a ton of cash to get stuff done. And you know what? The truth is, they challenge me, and they challenge me in the best way because I tend to be one of those control freak oriented people. I'm definitely a control freak. And I also tend to have really big ideas. So to constantly be challenged to think smaller about some of the things, like the big idea is great, but starting, how do you start? It's practical, it's wise, and it was honestly just a great conversation with both of them. So get out your pen and paper and enjoy this chat with Deb and Becky from Save Your Town. All right, welcome to the podcast, Deb and Becky.
Thank you. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, we sure are. Thank you.
On a Saturday morning, no less.
That's the way we roll in small towns. We work when we can.
Absolutely. So you two have been busy collecting and compiling and looking at the results from it's a every 2 year survey, correct?
Right.
Okay, so the 2019 Survey of Rural Challenges, we're going to get into that. We're going to get into kind of the trends and the things that have stayed the same since the last one in 2017, the things that maybe are new on the list. And but I think it's always helpful. Becky, you've been on the podcast before, but I would love to hear, and I don't care who shares or how you guys, share this story. You probably have this down, how you came together and what Save Your Town is all about.
Deb, you tell them how we met.
Yes, we actually first met on Twitter, and Becky's really good at wanting to meet people in real life. So she found a way to invite me to Hutchinson, Kansas for a bloggers tour where there were, I think, 11 of us on that tour. And we spent 3 crazy, hectic days in Hutch and had a great time. And we just began talking about rural and developed into a friendship. And one day she showed up and said, we need to work together. That's the short version.
Cool.
Yeah, and I said, we should do something together. And she said, oh, I don't want to wait a year. And I'm like, oh, crap, she didn't want to do anything.
But what I meant was, I don't want to wait. Let's go now. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's not make this complicated. I like you, you like me. Let's just do this thing.
Yeah.
Now, she had a full-time job at the time, and I had about 5 businesses going. So, it totally made sense to add a new business, right?
Sure.
Okay, well, let's actually talk about that for a second, because how did it start? And how did you carve out room for it, given the fact that you both had fairly full plates at the time?
I am a lifelong entrepreneur, and so I've always had multiple things going on. And my husband and I have a cattle ranch, a very small cattle ranch. I have to say that because I'm from Oklahoma, and sometimes people picture like the Ponderosa, and we're really not that big. We're bigger than a hobby, though. So I've got cattle. I had a liquor store at the time. I think I was still just wrapping up with Tourism Currents. I was doing speaking on small town things, and I was writing, which all of that kind of the small town stuff started in about 2006 when I founded my site Small Biz Survival, which is all about small towns and small businesses.
Yep.
And so that kind of led to lots of stuff, which is why I was on Twitter in 2006. And then that's why we could meet on Twitter. And so I was doing all of those things. And I've always had multiple things. I was wrapping one up, which was a venture in small towns and tourism called Tourism Currents, which is still a thing and run by Sheila Scarborough from Texas, which is who I did it with. And now it's hers alone, and along with Leslie McClellan. And from there, since that was wrapping up, I was like, what do I want to do next? I want to just focus right on small towns. And Deb was the person I thought of. Now, Deb, you tell us about your life at the time.
So, sure. I was I was a communications director in Hampton, Iowa at their chamber, and
which is a role you volunteered yourself into, right?
Yes. And they eventually figured out how to pay me and bumped me up the scale. And it was awesome. I love being out and talking to businesses, and I focused on tourism too. I started my own blog in 2008 called Need a Little Advice, and it was all over the place. I mixed personal with business. I wouldn't do that again now. But anyway, it introduced me to a lot of people as well. And a position came open here in Webster City as the chamber director. And my friend Mel said, you should apply for that. And I'm like, yeah, I'll never get it. She goes, apply anyway. I did, and I got it. And I've been in Webster City since 2013. But as a chamber director, I did a full 4 years. And during that position, I did start speaking in other small towns because they'd asked me to come over and talk about something. I'm like, oh, okay. So I was getting my feet wet with the whole speaking experience. And when Becky came along, I thought, well, maybe I could do this. And I asked her, well, what are we going to do? And she said, well, we're going to put together a kit and put it online and people will buy it. I'm like, okay, they'll really
She's
buy
like,
it?
Will they buy it? Yeah, they'll buy it. So we sat there and we said, okay, here's what we're going to make up. We're going to make up an answer that would work for any community, whether you had 200 people in your town or you had 2,000 people or you've got 20,000. So this was going to have to be the kind of project that would work anywhere that would help your community. And we came up with the pop-up fair, which is you're going to go downtown and on your sidewalks, right on the sidewalks, you're going to do a pop-up fair and pop-up businesses. And that is going to help. If there are any businesses in your town, it's going to help those businesses. If you've got nothing, this is your starting point to build more entrepreneurship. Right? This works anywhere. You can scale it up. You can scale it down. If you've got one block, if you've got a stretch of sidewalk that is, 10 feet wide, we can pop up on it. So that's what we made up. And we put it online and people went, yeah, I need something like that in my community. And of course, we drew on our existing audience. It drew some new people to us. And the genesis of that then ends up being what now is called saveyour.town. It was a URL that was available. And Deb's like, we should totally do that. I'm like, I hate the name. And she's like, no, I love it. And so, of course, she was right. So we have it booked now. And it's not that we're going to save your town. No, you are going to save your town. With your people, your assets, what you have right now, you're going to do it.
And besides our own experiences in our own small towns and our own communities, we are both travel quite a bit and work in rural communities. So there's so many stories that we share, and we do a weekly newsletter for the entire month and a paid video once a month. So people start with the newsletter and graduate pretty quickly to the video, which is any number of topics, but something related to what people have told us they want, which is really important. We're not just saying, hey, I think they want to know. We're able to look back at the surveys we've done and say, oh, look, all these people want to know that. So that's what we talk about.
Right. I don't know that I've ever told either of you this, but the way that I found you, because I didn't just hear about you for the first time at the conference.
Oh, I thought you just walked up to me at Rural X and was like, oh, look.
No. It was several years ago. I somehow stumbled upon the Empty Buildings Tour information.
Awesome.
Which I have never told you, but at the time I wasn't in a position to implement it, but I remember saying, what a great idea. Yep.
When she started with that chamber.
Right. I was driving in for my interview, actually, and I drive down the Main Street area, and I counted 14 empty buildings. And any good chamber director will tell you, oh, shoot, I'm going to have to fill them. And it was true. I had to fill them. They hired me and said, now, what are you going to do about these empty buildings? And a month later, we held a tour of empty buildings. I just thought, well, let's showcase them. Let's show them off. Let's show what's available and possible in our community. because before that, people were just like, no, let's not talk about them. And
Right.
that we have these buildings, and we just kept talking about them too. And within a year, we had 12 on the tour, and within a year, 10 were filled.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, honestly, any small town that has ever experienced that, that's incredible in just a year.
I always like to point out that even if they hadn't filled a single building,
Yeah,
the fact
right.
that they got 12 people to agree to have their building toured and featured, and every single one of them cleaned up their building,
Yeah.
then it's a win.
Absolutely. And I think the thing that I love so much about it was, this is a kind of a broader observation about how we tend to act in small towns. There's this weird shame about certain things.
Yes.
And it's like, instead of being shameful about it, acknowledge that it's a thing and just talk about it. And then the shame goes away. And then you can actually creatively start to work on a way to address it if it's a challenge, right? So that was, I think, the thing for me, where it's like, I love that you're saying, yeah, well, everybody can see that it's empty. So saying we have empty buildings does not somehow make you a failure or a destined to be, dead in 10-year community. That's not the point. But I just love that you said, well, no, like, just talk about it. And I think if we did more of that with more of our rural challenges, then, we could actually start to maybe move the needle on addressing some of them. So that's one of the things that really drew me to it. I was like, oh, I love it. We're just talking about it.
Awesome.
It's great that you mentioned that, because talking is so important, not only to talk about what the problem may be, the challenge may be, but taking action as well. Let's get to that sooner rather than later. And it's how I think we ended up decided to doing embedded community experiences.
Yeah.
Now, I love to go. I kind of like to move my mailing address when I go to a town. I'm there for 3 or 4 days and asking people, what do you want? What do you want? As many people as possible. And it evolves into more conversation, and it evolves into, who do you know? Let's call them right now and make that happen. It's just, for me, it's so much fun. I like doing that. And it came out of sharing what you have openly, like you said,
right,
and looking for solutions and small steps to get there.
The same thing that allowed Deb to see that the solution to empty buildings was to show them off is the same thing that makes the embedded community experience work so well, is that Deb is looking at a community from the perspective of someone who doesn't live there or is new there. So when she moved into the community of Webster City, Iowa, she's looking at it with new eyes, and she's like, well, then we should just show this off. We should get people in there so that we can fill them.
right.
And the same thing when she goes and walks through a community, then she can look at it and go, well, why don't we call this guy? Like, why don't we put some paint on this plywood right here? Like, so why don't we split this building and like put some pop-ups in here? And people go, oh, and
Right.
so then it just like kind of unleashes this entire wave of action, because she's doesn't know enough about your community to know that you're supposed to ignore that.
Yeah, she doesn't know the politics that are at play. And I love that, because what is one of my favorite things when I do go to other towns that I've maybe never been to is, normally I'm there to speak, right? And it's maybe to a community event, maybe it's a specific women's event. It all depends on the community. But every single time I get to tell them the things that they have going for them. And they almost look at each other like, hey, we really do have this going for us. I mean, they just sometimes need, whether it's the challenges you're trying to creatively solve or, like I said, move the needle on, or it's just a deep appreciation for what's working. Sometimes you just need somebody outside of you to say, hey, you're really like rocking it in this particular way. It's amazing how we get the blinders on. We're just too close to our own stuff sometimes.
Yep. Or they don't think it's so cool. Oh yeah, we got a really nice lake, but who cares?
Right. Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Lots of people.
We do this a lot when we visit a community. We're like, oh my God, look, you have this. You have a national forest in your backyard, right? This is awesome. And they're like, oh yeah, it's just the trees. And you're like, no, seriously.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, okay. So you guys came together and you started with a kit about pop-ups, which is still relevant, wouldn't you say? Is there any big trend that you've seen with pop-ups that's different from what it looked like when you first put your kit together?
That's a really good question. And I think First of all, we don't have to define pop-ups as much as we used to. People have heard the term enough now. And I think there's actually more acceptance in traditional economic development now. They don't look quite so scandalized as they did before. 3 or 4 years ago, it was like, you just want to do pop-ups for an hour? Like, that won't mean anything. And now economic developers are like, yeah, that's absolutely what we need.
Right.
Which is a great sea change to see, because I'm so used to, like everybody else, I'm so used to thinking that the economic developers and the traditional formal organizations are still trying to recruit factories. And I think there's been there's just a whole sea change going on of people realizing, no, really, it's about our own local businesses, and the best way to get them is to start small.
What do you think is the reason for that change, though? Because I'm going to start pulling in a little of this information from your latest video. Do you feel, and are you finding that there is still somewhat of this idea in small towns that the people in charge don't want to do what we think we need them to do? Or there's that kind of the us versus them, the old guard, new guard, or whatever you want to call it. Do you sense that people still think it's there? And maybe it is. What would you say about that? Because I don't think every small community is feeling that change, maybe.
It's highly variable, right? It just depends on the people in your community. And so if you are in one of those towns that has that city council made up of those people who were carved out of stone a long time ago, as far as you can tell, then you think nothing has changed. Nothing has changed.
Right.
On the other hand, we're seeing a lot more communities where there is change going on, and there is an interesting dynamic of, well, we can do things outside the council. We can get things done as a group of people. And I think you're a great example of this. And the networking that you're doing to make your project happen doesn't depend entirely on somebody else being super progressive in their thinking, as long as you're doing your thing. And I think that we're seeing a growing realization that we need a lot less permission than we think we do.
It's that. And a lot of towns that I'm in, they have that traditional economic developer that smokestacks. That's what we need. We need another smokestack. But I'm starting to see more community vitality directors, or I'm starting to see more chambers taking over that part of filling the downtown. It's, a small step between the old guard and the idea-friendly method. And we just keep talking about how everybody can do it. And here's your idea-friendly method. And if, they don't like what you do, pay the fine and do it anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So you used one of your coined phrases from Save Your Town, which is idea friendly. Can you give a quick overview, or is there obviously a video you prefer they go watch, which I'm fine with too. But since you slipped it in there, can you give a just brief description of what that even means?
It's Becky's baby. I'll let her explain. She put it together and we use it everywhere.
I was going to say, it's not that she slipped it in so much as we can't help. Can't keep it out.
Right.
So idea friendly, if you go to saveyour.town/gift, that's the gift we give away when we go and speak. And so somebody's heard us talk. We provide them with a video, because anytime you hear the speaker talk, you're like, oh, the people that really needed to hear this weren't here.
Yeah, right.
So we made this video. It's 30 minutes and it's designed for you to have like a little gathering in your town and share the idea friendly method. And so here's the quick version of idea friendly. The thing is, our set in our ways, committee of negativity people have had us being unfriendly to new ideas for far too long. So idea friendly is this way that you can go about creating your ideas and making them happen without so much permission, without so much overhead and organization and formality. So getting away from the formality, and you start with whatever your big idea is. And now, Rebecca, I know you know what your big idea is. Mm-hmm. So you start with that big idea for your community. That's the big vision part of it that will draw other people to you. So you need to gather your crowd. Now, you know how to do this. You've been doing it, which is you take that idea and you put it somewhere that other people can find it, whether that's walk up to other people and, say it to them in their face. Here's the big idea. Are you in? Would you like to help?
Right.
And so you're gathering your crowd that way, but you can also do it. We're very online people, all of us, everybody listening to podcasts. You are all online people. So you know where to put an idea online so that people can come to it. So you're gathering your crowd of people who are excited to work on it. So once you've got that crowd, you turn that crowd into a powerful network by building connections. So it's not enough just to get people and get them to say, like, okay, you're going to do what I tell you to do. No, that's like old way, only you're doing it instead of the old people. And so instead of that, you want to build connections between people. So you're going to let your crowd talk to each other and facilitate that, bring them together in the same space, which I know you've done. Mm-hmm. And so you're doing those things where they build connections with each other, and you're also building connections out. Who knows the person that knows more about this, or who has the thing that we need, or who is able to access a resource that we've got to get our hands on. So you're building those connections to make it happen. And then you and that network together, all of you go out and take small steps. And so it's not just about you, the person with the big idea, telling everyone how they're going to do things and running the committees and organization and like accountability. It's more about generating small but meaningful involvement by everybody. So everyone has a role in making this thing happen, and they can go forward and do it. Now, if the essence of your idea is that your community is going to be more active in, you're going to generate more community groups, more community activities, training, education, like courses where people share their skills with each other, then you want them to go out and make those things happen. They don't need you to tell them.
Right.
You just need to create the context where they can make that happen.
Right. That would, honestly, can I stop you real quick? We will be sharing this. Like, I'm excited. I'm now thinking about how we're going to promote this episode and like all the little pieces and all the little things. One of my favorite things that you ever said, and I remember that it was a shareable from your first episode with me, is to create the context where magic can happen. I love that. I love that so, so much, because I am a control freak by nature. You and I discovered that. You discovered that. I always knew that about myself. And it is very, very hard. Like, to let go and say, okay, I don't have to hold so tightly to exactly how this thing has to unfold, but I have to hold tight to the vision of what we want to create. And it is really hard to get over that. And yet when you do, man, does magic actually happen, right? And that's all I really care about, is tapping into the collective wisdom of the people that live and work in my community, and giving them a way to highlight what they're capable of doing. I think every small town is just fraught with tons of talent and skills. And a lot of it is untapped because there isn't a context. So I love that so much. Didn't mean to interrupt it. It's such a great, easy framework, and I love it.
And I withheld myself from interrupting you back because you said what I have to hold tight to is that vision. That's not quite it. You don't hold tight to the vision, which may be like the structure or the way I want it to be. You need to hold tight to what you want it to do for your community. And
right. Well, the goal, like what it is you're trying to create.
What it will do for you, because it's not, people are like, oh, we have to do this entire beautification of downtown and we've got this plan and we're going to plan it out. No, It's really not about that. It's about people gathering downtown.
Well, and here's the deal.
Connecting communities. So you have to figure out what's the thing this does for the community. And that's what you hold tight to. Because the form of it may change. The structure may change.
Right. I equate vision to the way we're all going to feel when it's done.
Ooh, I like that.
So, and that's actually when people hire me to speak, that's one of the things I ask them is, well, what do you want people to feel when they leave? Like, so what's the point of the event? Exactly. And there's a huge range of things that people can feel. And so that's when I think of vision. So mine is maybe more in line. It's just, again, we got to clarify our words too sometimes, because vision means different things to different people, but
right.
It certainly isn't a strategic plan.
Exactly. And old way economic development, it really is the strategic plan. And it is like, it has to be in this place with these people, with this structure. It's got to look just like this. And you're like, but, we could all feel the same benefit by doing it in a completely different way that would cost a lot less and be a lot easier and
involve more people.
More people and build better results for the community. And
one of my so Joe Bartman, his episode will go live on Monday, and he and I were talking about collective vision and the idea that if a community says like, oh, we are all chugging in the same direction, they're probably kidding themselves.
That's just we, the people in this room, and even not really that.
Yeah. And so what we talked about was like, what I would hold fast for a vision for my community would be that everybody deserves to live in a community that they love.
I'm with you on that.
And so when you look at it that way, if that's all we're chugging towards, like in this, like that's something most of us can probably steer in that general direction, right? But it is different from strategy. And that's one of the things I just think is when I'm talking about my control tendencies, it absolutely would be about quality, and it would be about how it all, and that's, you end up with committees And you end up with people that don't want to do it because they had no part or no say in how it should look. And all of us have experienced that, I think, if we're honest with ourselves. So the idea-friendly method is awesome. And what a great framework for people.
Thank you. It's something that we put together out of, this whole lifetime of experience. And then it's continued to evolve as Deb says, I made it up because I kind of had it ready by the time that Deb and I started working together. But then it has evolved and strengthened immeasurably because of Deb's real world chamber experience. And she, has a different background and she's lived in big cities and came home. And so she, just the very contact with her has helped me to change and shape that framework over time so that it is even better, works even better for people. There was one memorable time when she and I were on a little working retreat in Galveston, and we're like sticking stuff to the walls. And she's like, yeah, but what would that look like? And how is that going to work? And what about this? And doesn't somebody have to take notes? And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
That took me a while to get over. What do you mean? They're gathering, but nobody's taking notes? I don't understand. And it took a while to get through that, but I get it. If I need to do something, I write down what I need to do or what I'm going to do. Need is not the right word. What I'd really like to do to make a difference in my community.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not one general note taker that then sends the minutes out and then everybody reviews the minutes at the next meeting and looks at the financials and you don't get nothing done.
Yeah. And it's really, it's more about tapping into what people are excited enough to do and less about dragging people into doing something.
Yeah.
A good example, we've talked about it before, having an event in your community. As a chamber background person, I was really used to just planning the entire event and then taking it to the community and say, here's what we're doing. Now I need some volunteers.
Yeah.
And nobody would volunteer because it wasn't their idea. They weren't really involved in it. So for one big, huge event, I knew I couldn't plan the entire thing myself. And so I left a good portion of it unplanned and reached out to the community and asked, so what do you want to do? And, the first answer, well, whatever you plan. I'm like, no, I'm not planning it. What do you want to do? And, one guy got it. He said, well, I'd like a chili cook-off. I'm like, great, you're in charge of that. And it just grew from letting people in the community do what they wanted to do, not your STP, the same 10 people. And it was fabulous because the community was involved in the event and their friends invited them to come down. And it just turned out really, really perfect in an imperfect kind of way.
So that's an example of creating the context where something can happen. She said, here's when the event will be, and here's it needs to be family friendly, and it has to happen at this time. And then she set up some guidelines like that, like family friendly. And, she, as a chamber person, she's like, we have umbrella insurance. You just have to let me know. She set up the area and said, we've planned some stuff for this area. The whole rest of this area, wide open. Y'all can have all of it. And that creates the context and the guidelines where something can happen that people can make happen themselves instead of, the chamber, the organization, the formal group plans it all and then says, hey, we need volunteers.
This couldn't be coming along at a more timely. Everything we talk about always feels timely because these are just things that I think we're all grappling with.
Absolutely.
In small towns. And, I'm our current chamber president. I'm done with this position in January 1.
Hey.
And our director has resigned.
Oh gosh.
Again. And so I say again, we've had a very hard time just having any consistency. And it's not because they hate the job and quit. There's always a legitimate reason why they're moving on, but it makes me think what if we don't hire the director? I'm saying that out loud, which is insane.
Yes.
But I think we do need to think about and this is good and timely. And so, I might have to have a few people listen to this right along with us when it goes live. But you're talking about things that, we have a summer celebration, right? A lot of communities do. We've had it for, I think last year was our 47th or 8th annual, right? And it's one of those things that as a chamber, we end up getting a lot of feedback like, what happened to this? And what happened to this piece? And when will it ever feel the way it did when I was growing up? And I'm just like, holy smokes, guys. I don't know. Then there's 9 people on the board. We sit around and we battle. Now we don't battle and fight, but we battle through what's reasonable to bring. Because all of that stuff costs so much money, right? And we're a small town and we don't have it. So I love the idea of saying, well, what is it that you want to see? What do you really want to see? And would you care about it enough that you'd want to be a part of getting it here or doing it or whatever?
You don't say it that way, Rebecca. You say, great, I'm going to put you in charge of that. Just give me a holler if you need any help.
We've set aside this area downtown. Let me know if you need more or less area. And you go do those things and let me know if you need help. Also, you don't know it, but this other person mentioned the same thing. I'm going to connect the two of you and y'all can go do it.
Right. So what about the times I'm thinking about me and like even saying that out loud to my board, like we're going to let's try this. Let's try to like, just, get people involved this way. What do you do when the people say, oh, well, yeah, no, I don't want to run it. I don't want to lead it. I just think it's a good idea.
Well, it can't be that good if you don't want to be involved. Sorry. We just won't do it.
Right. Yeah.
You got to take a stand. It's okay to kill the golden goose. 47, 48 years is a long time. And if it's still really popular and people are doing it and it's bringing tourism in, then by all means go forward. It's not always about the money.
Yeah.
But if, 50 people show up, it's not worth doing.
Yep. And I love that because I feel like for my own community, you can say that. I don't know that I have said that out loud. Like, it's okay to let things die. Their natural death, right? They're coming to a natural death.
If you need to get Deb on a conference call with your board, that can happen.
Yes.
But you know what I mean? I hear you say that and I'm like, oh man, I've said that. That's met with some, well, I don't know, resistance is maybe the word, where people just say, but we can't let it die. And then I say,
because they've not heard it before, right? You just have to keep saying it. They have to get used to it. And then you have to have Deb say it. And they're like, Deb's right. And you're like, what? You haven't been listening to me? But you laid all that groundwork for them to be ready so that when Deb says it, it sounds like a revelation from above. And they're like, oh, the little halo over her head. And she's awesome. And they believe her and it's all great. Sometimes you have to hear those things. And I think that honestly, that's one of the roles our videos play for people. Mm-hmm. Is that they watch a video and they go, oh, this is the one, right? And so then they get the right people together and they go, we're going to just watch this video, knowing that it's going to say the thing that they've been trying to say over and over.
Yeah.
And that's going to turn the tide for them. And so that's a very affordable way for somebody to change people's thinking. I know you and I talked about this actually separately, just talked about it when we got together last time, but about how you change somebody's thinking and what they're going to do. You have to change their experiences.
Right.
That's the only thing you can control is what they experience. And so watching a video may be an experience. Often, if you're going to talk about what the event will look like, you can't do it in a meeting room.
Yeah.
You have to go where the event is going to happen.
Yep. People have to feel it. And actually, if you can give them a taste of what it is, that's then they experience it.
Yes.
And it changes their mind instead of just talking about it.
Take them to somebody else's event, or you get out the duct tape and the cardboard and you mock stuff up, or you get the paint and you mark temporary lines on the grass and go, all right, this right here, this is going to be this, and right here, this is going to be that. And we're leaving that whole area open for people. What do you want to put here? And hand them the can of paint. Like, all right, so let's dream things up. But you can't do it in meeting rooms. Quit talking about the future of your community inside of four walls that just cuts you off, and especially don't do it at City Hall. Please, I beg of you, because City Hall is just like embedded with bad vibes and unhappy people for decades. And there's no way people can think creatively while sitting in the council chambers at City Hall.
That's where our Economic Development Board meets.
And they can post the special meeting will be happening at the location of the event.
So,
I understand they need a regular meeting place. I get that.
Yeah,
I would love it if you would make your regular meeting place the picnic table outside on the square, right?
Yeah, or just a roving, like maybe we meet at a different place every single month. And I get that that's maybe challenging from a logistical standpoint, but it's not impossible.
Maybe you support your local business and meet at one of your local businesses, whether it's a restaurant or an event venue or even a shop that's got a back room.
Right. I have to tell you, this is making me think of, there's a small community in North Dakota that they also had lost their chamber director. And so she called me and said, she said, what do you think about this? She said, I'm thinking about not having an office for the chamber person. And I said, so where are they going to do their work? She goes, wherever they feel like it, in businesses. And I said, do it. I said, what's the worst that can happen with that is that the person feels like they don't have a home and they need a landing place occasionally. And so then you adjust. Like, you can always give them an office back if it doesn't feel like it works, but it's that exact thing. Like, get into your local businesses and do your work there. I mean, that's cool. That's a cool way to feature what's happening in your community, and you stay more in touch with it too.
Colfax, Washington moved their chamber offices into a building that they then divided the front of it for shared retail. So there's now like 8 retailers in the front.
Yeah, cool.
A woman that is doing frozen yogurt and a woman that's baking cookies. So tell me that you don't want your chamber office to be where they're baking cookies.
No kidding.
And where you see the constant stream of people coming in and out, and you're part of the community.
Right.
And I love about that, they have to walk through the retail stores to get to the chamber office.
Right.
So when you go to visit your chamber director, that's just brilliant.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so many good things for our listeners to take back. And I love talking about this stuff. I really do, because my favorite thing about your work in particular is that we're never talking about spending gobs of money. That's never, ever, ever what it's about. And I think that is the thing that people get hung up on. And that's, I think, also why there's that feeling of, but we need to ask for permission because we don't hold the keys to the money bag that our community has access to, right? There's usually a board and there's usually some politics around that. So all of your ideas are like, well, why do you need that? Why do you think you need that?
Exactly. You may need that ultimately, but start here. Mm-hmm. Start with the duct tape and cardboard. Start with the dollar store pools. Start with some chalk on the ground and go from there. You don't need money at first. It's kind of like anything that you've done, like raising kids. If you had to pay up front for your children's entire life from birth to 18, you'd never have kids.
Right. That's so true.
Because you'd never get enough money to be able to make that work. So instead, you have to pay it a little bit at a time as you go. And you do it in small steps, right? You get the baby, it's, not that bad. And then, you're sending them to college.
Right.
Hundreds of thousands, right? You get to do small steps in between. And that's how you can afford things. So stop thinking you got to pay up front for the whole deal.
And the other thing that you said to me once that I think bears repeating, especially in this context, is that the easiest way to get the people that have the keys to that money to want to be a part of it is to show them that there's interest. And you show them by doing it.
Absolutely.
So in a small way, you can say, oh yeah, of course there's desire or interest in this. We've been doing it for the past 6 months or a year or whatever. It doesn't have to come in that formal package like we're so used to thinking that it does.
Absolutely. And this goes back to how do you change their thinking? You change the experience they're having. And so when they're walking through
absolutely.
And they're part of it and they're, eating food from the food vendors and they're seeing the thing going on and their people are around them are happy, then it's so much easier to say yes to a little bit more funding. And that's the other key, right? So you get them in the experience and you don't ask them for the full payment all up front. You say, can you help us make the next step?
Right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the survey and the results that you got back. So you send out this survey and you look at kind of 2 facets. You've got the rural community challenges and then small business owner challenges, right?
Right.
Okay, so what are the themes that keep coming up? Especially, let's just focus at least to start on the community side of things. What are the challenges that people are facing?
The community challenges, and this is pretty similar to the results that we saw in 2017 and also in 2015. But number 1, always at the top, losing young people. That's always been in the top 2, tied with downtown is dead. Right? So I think I've just described everybody's town, right? We're losing young people. Our downtown is not as lively as we would like it to be.
Okay. Yep.
Not enough housing. This was actually a new entry because based on what people keep telling us. So that got added as a choice and it's shot up immediately to number 3, not enough good housing. Number 4 is need new residents. And number 5 was no one shops in town. So I think that if you look at it, we've got these 2 themes of like, we need new people and we're losing our young people, but we also don't have a place for people to live. And our downtown is dead and nobody's shopping there, which I think are closely related.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's interesting how, when you think about all of these things, how much they really intersect, right? I mean, it's like the challenge is your downtown is dead because nobody shops there and nobody shops there because it's dead. So,
Exactly. And that was really what led us to create that pop-ups fair was
right.
If you want to fix the fact that your downtown is dead and nobody shops there, you've got to bring more life and activity in a temporary way. And so the pop-ups were the answer.
Right. Anything that, imagine you get verbatim responses back from people. Do you, or is it just multiple choice?
Oh no, it's wide open and people tell us all kinds of things.
Yeah. So what was the most interesting thing that you saw this year, do you think?
Most interesting thing. I mean, it falls into some themes, but I think the most interesting thing is, without quoting somebody specifically, is that what works in one community isn't the same thing that works well in another community.
Mm-hmm.
And so no one blanket solution works for everybody.
Right.
So in some places, it's like working together is what's working best. And then there's another group going, we can't get people to work together. And so we get that because there's not going to ever be, this is I remember when there was like a guy going around, he was the expert. He was like, we're going to set up eBay shops and everybody's going to, the young people are going to teach old people how to post their stuff on eBay. And this is going to save small towns. And I just remember thinking, that's great that worked somewhere for you. Fine. But every community is different.
Right. Well, and I think that if nothing else, I hope that gives people somewhat of a sense of peace about the fact that the struggles that you're having really, really are your own. And that's why this Save Your Town, I mean, again, you're not saving us. We have to save ourselves because we're the ones closest to our own stuff. We're the ones that are closest to our own challenges, which, yes, can sometimes create blind spots, but it also means we probably have the answers. We just need to be willing to think about them differently, right? And approach them differently. And so for me, I'm not a fan of saying, well, we need to resist against this or resist against these people. I don't think that's productive, but it's doing it in small ways. So the idea of friendly method is one of the ways that we can do that without going in and storming the castle, right?
Exactly. I have a lot of conversations, and you see this a lot in the open-ended answers. People tell us the city council will not do the thing I want them to. The economic development director is not doing the thing I want. Or, these new people are coming into our town and they're trying to do things differently. Just quit worrying about what other people are doing. Take your idea of how you want the community to feel, and you go start making that happen. And you attract other people to you. That's gathering your crowd. You build connections, you ask people, you ask each other, you find the resources you need, and then you take super small steps. And if you're busy doing all of that, then you just really do not care what those other people are doing.
Right. Deb, I have a question for you specifically. So you're no longer in the capacity of the chamber director, or are you still doing that work?
I am not in that position anymore. I've been doing this full time for almost 3 years.
Okay.
And it's great.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure at the beginning if it was going to work out. I mean, I figured it would, but that's a big leap to leave that steady paycheck to having to go out and create your own.
Oh, but definitely.
When you give up the idea that it's about money and it's really just about serving and helping people, it makes what you do a lot easier.
So my question for you is, what does your involvement look like right in your community now?
I sit on the board of Legacy Learning, Boone River Valley. So I'm active with that group. It's art and nature combined in workshops of some sort.
Okay, cool.
I'm currently involved in a project that they're part of, and so is the newspaper and Brendan Hoffman, who is an international photojournalist. So he's here for 2 months. We figured out how to bring him to town, how to raise the funds, and a Facebook grant really helped with that. And he is the resident photographer on the newspaper's staff for the next 2 months. And he's also teaching a photo workshop for anybody in the county at no charge over 6 different weeks. So
cool.
The community's really excited about that. We've got over 30 people signed up already, which is a big deal when you're used to 5 people signing up.
Right.
So I get involved where I choose to get involved.
Do you feel that, I've said this before, Becky and I've talked about this before, that it feels like you're never an expert in your own backyard. And I question the word expert anyway. I mean, I just believe we're always learning and always getting better. So I don't know when you reach that title anyway,
yeah.
But you have expertise. There's no question about that. Do you feel as though it falls on deaf ears more in your community? Is that something that you personally experience or not?
Well, no, because I'm not randomly offering expertise.
Yeah.
If somebody comes and talks with me and we have a conversation, I always get back to what do you want? And we go that direction and, of course, share how to do that in an idea-friendly way. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But I don't have enough time to be tied up with what people think of me and my occupation and my choices.
Yeah, I think that there's a ton to be learned from somebody that's living that perspective, because I don't think that's easy. I personally don't, I don't think that's easy in a small town. Because, how big is Webster City? Is it
8,000.
It's 8. Okay, I was thinking it was even a little bigger. Yeah, I mean, it's still a really small town. And I say this to people a lot, and I would love to hear if this is something you've lived and you know better. You know that you work better without all of that self-doubt and with all that fear and concern. I think it's really hard to get there. So one of the things that I think about with this in particular is that, people are actually probably going to judge you if you're living in any sort of out loud kind of way, right? If you're confident, they're going to judge you because and it's not because small town people are nastier. I really don't believe that's true. There's just less of us.
Exactly.
So
big city people judge you too.
Yeah, they do.
You just don't realize.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's one of the things that I have told people. Do you have any other kind of pieces of advice or things that you would say to somebody that's really struggling with that identity thing of what will people say about me?
Well, the first thing to realize is it doesn't matter what they say because it's not about you. It's about them. They are reflecting their own self-doubts onto you. Mm-hmm. So you have the choice to accept it or not.
Right.
Be kind, lead with kindness, and avoid them if you have to.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I've said before, too, that a lot of times some of the biggest naysayers may be the people that love you the most because they're genuinely concerned for your well-being.
Absolutely true.
And so when you look at it that way, and I say this all the time to people, too, and again, I love to talk to two people that are, you're making huge impacts outside of your community. And then, there are times maybe people in your community don't even get it. Now, Deb, you worked in a capacity where you were fairly public. It's a public position to have in a small town. Yeah, but I just think that it's recognizing that people operate from their own sets of values. And if somebody really values security or stability, they would think anybody that has a business of their own is a little crazy, right? And that's okay. And so when you kind of just accept it, like you said, they are literally reflecting or projecting their own filter back onto you. It has nothing to do with you. And only you have to let it derail you. You're the one that actually is in control of that, right? I mean, you can take the feedback and, like you said, ignore them. Or if they're your family, you can say, I love you and thank you for your input. I'm going to do this anyway.
Yeah, you don't even have to say that last part. The I love you's enough and a good hug.
Yeah. So I always just think that it's the dynamics of small communities that people can find especially challenging. And so I wanted to get your opinion on that since you are both living in an out loud way.
It's really, it's the thing that we face that's probably the most challenging is just how do we do this in relation to other people? And I think that every one of us that's here gathered today listening, all of us, we all have this question is how do I do the things that are in my heart in relation to all these other people that are around me? And my brain is just such that I'm like, and we're going to go do it anyway. We don't care. That's just the way my brain works. Right. But not everybody has that I can blithely ignore people gene built into them. And I think Deb's a far more sensitive person about these things maybe than I am. I could be wrong.
It took me a while to get there, and I still have to remind myself there's a couple of people that just make me nuts. And when I get to that point, Becky will say, it doesn't matter. They don't control you. What are you doing? I'm like, yeah, all right. I'll let it go. It's just, we all have that. Well, most of us all have that where you feel somebody else is really trying to put you down, but it doesn't matter.
And this is why we gather people across city lines, right? The city limits do not define who you are, but it's really easy to feel crazy when you are the only one thinking like this in your community. And that's why we gather. I like to say we're all in this together. We're just in different towns.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is why we have podcasts. This is why we have videos. This is why we have emails with friends. This is why we get on Twitter and we talk about things. This is why you send that Snapchat that will disappear. This is why we have the opportunity to connect with each other. This communication ability is what gives us our superpower as small town people right now. We can connect with each other and gain the reinforcement in a way that was never available before without a huge structure of formality. If you wanted to talk to people outside your town before, you had to join the Rotary or something where you could be part of the statewide organization. And, you go through the formal process and there's an organization. You could run for office. You could go to district meetings, right? But it was such overhead. And now you can just shoot off a Snapchat to somebody and blow off some steam.
Well, and when you think about all this, because I totally agree, there's never been a cooler time to move to a small town and be a big thinker.
Exactly. Write that down. That was really good. Right? Write that down. Put that on shirts.
It's because you are not confined. The size. Well, that's why I always say the size of your life is not determined by your zip code. That's my tagline. I believe that wholeheartedly. And you think about the tenacity of the trailblazers that came before us that did do amazing big things in a time where they didn't have these kinds of communication tools. And wow, I wish I could go back and meet them, because you just think about what it took to be a crazy person, again, air quotes around crazy, all by yourself at a time where you couldn't readily say, where are the other people that feel this way?
Well,
it's
at
such a
some
gift.
point in time, a crazy person and their family created the community you now live in.
Absolutely.
And we're considered clinically crazy by other people, right? Let's just be honest about that.
Yeah. And I think that's partly for me, one of the fun things about thinking about where we've come from. And to always honor that, hold that, in high regard. It doesn't mean that that's the direction I want to head in necessarily, is step backwards, right? I always want to be thinking about what comes next and what do we need, to adapt to what's happening now. But you can't just dismiss everything that's ever been done. That's not what innovation is, right? It's building on what's been done.
I live in a community of 30 people. We're not even a town. We're not even a village. There is a bank here, Hopeton State Bank in Oklahoma. And they just celebrated their 100th anniversary and they handed out T-shirts that I'm not kidding, say on the back, shaped by the past, focused on the future.
Oh, I love that.
Shaped by the past, focused on the future.
Right. That's exactly what I believe in my heart. That's what I believe small towns are. There's always so much heritage. And so it's helping everybody say, yeah, let's celebrate that at the same time. The yes and, not the no but, but the yes and. How do we take everything that we've done and continue to think differently about what we're going to need, 5 years from now or 10 years from now? What do we need today? We don't even have to think that far out. But you two you're doing such important work. I want to thank you tremendously for your time today. Thank you for asking people what they need. And in the show notes, we will get links to all of your information so people can get the full download of the results from the challenges survey, as well with your membership information, because you do make it very, very it's not cost prohibitive to get access to the work that you're doing. And I think you give great examples of how to do watch parties, how people can pull people together and focus on it, maybe one particular thing they're trying to tackle. So I just want to thank you both for taking time out of your Saturday and helping us drive this cool small town thing forward.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for having us. And we look forward to seeing some new friends at SaveYour.town soon.
Okay, you guys have a great day.
Take care.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Small Town Big Talk Show. If you enjoyed today's show, we invite you to subscribe on Stitcher, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, and we'd love for you to leave us a 5-star review. The more reviews we get, the easier it will be for other small town friends to find us. We encourage you to keep on living big in your small town, because the size of your life is not determined by your zip code.